Well, welcome to this section of New Start for the Family. We're glad that you are continuing to come to this series, this really comprehensive series on 8 important natural remedies that can not only prevent disease but reverse disease and make your life a lot healthier and happier. Today we're speaking about A. A stands for what? Air. And particularly what we're interested in is not just all air. We're interested in fresh air because there is a difference between fresh air and polluted air. Every minute we inhale about 8 quarts of air. You know, that's a couple of gallons per minute of air that we are putting into our system. We are more dependent upon the air we breathe than upon the food we eat. And a lot of people, of course, center in on the food for good reason. They need to. And nutrition is a major part of the New Start program. But often the A part, which we take in greater abundance, is rather neglected. The lungs are where the air exchange occurs. And every minute, 5 quarts of blood pass through the lungs, releasing carbon dioxide and absorbing oxygen. Now, we know the kidneys are major filtering organs as well, but the kidneys filter less than 1 quart per minute. And so, in reality, the lungs are also a filtering agent. They're actually taking on oxygen and getting rid of toxins. Carbon dioxide is a toxin, a metabolic toxin that in excess can cause significant problems to the human being. And so we do have a way of getting rid of toxins if we have healthy lungs. Researchers have been studying the harmful effects of polluted air on human beings. Their findings confirm that pollution depletes the air of negative ions. In addition, the common pollutant ozone has been demonstrated to cause eye irritation, shortness of breath, cough, worsened lung function, and decreased physical performance, as well as other problems, as you'll see. Worse yet, women living in one of the nation's most highly polluted regions, the South Coast Air Basin of California, experience increased risk of cancer in proportion to their total exposure to particulate pollutants. And so this major killer in those under the age of 85, pollution has a role to play. Particle pollution is lethal. In other words, when there are particles, toxic particles in the air, it can kill. Fine soot particles can get trapped deep in the lungs and can lead to heart attack, stroke, lung cancer, asthma attacks. Major sources of soot also include emissions from diesel vehicles, including school buses, barges, trucks, tugboats, and construction equipment as well. And one of the reasons why we see higher rates of these diseases in cities than in urban areas. Low environmental levels of fine and ultrafine particulate matter, as well as carbon dioxide, increase the risk of stroke. But the heightened risk occurs only during warm weather months, according to a Finnish study. So there are some advantages of cool air, and that is that it's actually fresher. Dr. Jana Kotaman from the National Public Health Institute in Finland and colleagues compared air pollution levels from 1998 to 2004 with the number of stroke deaths among elderly subjects living in Helsinki, a city known to have relatively little air pollution. What they found was during the warm season, every 6 micrograms per cubic meter increase in current day levels of fine particulate air pollution was associated with a 6.9% increase in deaths from stroke. The corresponding stroke death rate for previous day fine particulate increases was 7.4%. However, particulate air pollution had no effect on stroke during the cold season. And of course, in Helsinki, it gets pretty cold. The question is, how much pollution has to be in the air and how cold can it be before that pollution really doesn't have much effect on you. But certainly when you get down to the 0-degree temperatures of Helsinki in the winter, there's something actually refreshing about breathing in cold air. I know my father growing up in Michigan always believed there was no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing, and so he would dress up in the winter 10 degrees below zero and still go out and get his exercise. And I'd go out there for fun with him, and there is something invigorating about breathing in that cool air. There is something more fresh about it. We exhale 30 quarts of carbon dioxide every hour into the air. 2 people in a room for 8 hours exhale 190 cubic feet of carbon dioxide. The buildup of carbon dioxide in a room and the lack of oxygen will make us feel tired, sleepy, and mentally dull. So if you're in a room without ventilation, just a couple of people there for a while, it can start to get stale. And it can actually affect your mental performance and affect things physically as well. And that leads to another common problem with air, and that is indoor air pollution. You know, the World Health Organization states very clearly that indoor and outdoor air, when we combine them, that those polluted airs kill over 2 million people worldwide when we take a look at it. Now, we talked about stroke increasing, heart disease increasing. I don't want you to get to the place where you think that this is more important, the air you breathe is more important than cholesterol or hypertension or cigarette smoking or even cocaine. Cocaine, very high risk for heart attack. But the reason why it kills relatively few people in comparison to air, polluted air, is because only relatively few people utilize cocaine. Where in the air that we breathe, everybody in that environment is breathing it. So it basically increases the risk maybe about 5%. But when you compare that 5% increased risk with everybody doing it, there's a number of people that are actually being knocked off and killed, and strokes and heart attacks occurring, cancer, etc. But the individual risks and the individual choices of cholesterol foods and other foods actually have a greater impact. But that's not to ignore the problems of air pollution, and particularly indoor pollution. 33% of 813 homes tested were discovered to carry the staph bacterium. 50% of all illnesses are either caused by or aggravated by polluted indoor air. When ventilation is inadequate, air is contaminated, occupants grow drowsy, get headaches, function at lower activity levels. The level of some hazard pollutants are found to be 70 times greater in indoor air than outdoor air. And so this underscores the need for proper ventilation, the need for actually having plants in your home where oxygen is being produced. The plants produce oxygen, we consume it, and the plants actually consume carbon dioxide that we exhale. Another major problem that is caused to a large extent by pollution is asthma in the United States. There's an increase in asthma by 45% in the past decade. It affects 15 million people in the United States. 1/3 of them are under the age of 18. And it's the most common chronic illness of childhood now. Much more common than it used to be. For years, it was thought to be due to outdoor air pollution because we know that has a role to play. But air quality has actually improved as a result of emission standards and other things in recent decades, and asthma has gone up. Cigarette exposure, we know, has a major role to play in regards to asthma. But cigarette exposure has actually decreased, particularly in states like California in recent decades as well. And so why is asthma going up? The studies show it's due to poor sanitation, poor ventilation, dust, and what else? Roaches. Roaches are a major issue when it comes to asthma. The leading cause of asthma in the suburbs are dust mites and cats, and in urban areas, the problems are the droppings and carcasses of Blatella germanica, which is the German cockroach. Highest incidence of asthma is in urban areas. Bronx, 8.6% of children have asthma. 4.3% of city residents have it nationwide. And basically, the more roaches, the more asthma is what we're finding. And there are some inner city apartments where they will find 13,000 roaches inside there. And of course, you don't see all of those. For every roach that you see, there's 100 in hiding. Basically, you're just seeing the mentally ill ones. The other 99 are saying, whoa, what's he doing out there? And he's going to get it. And the rest of them are over there in hiding, and you don't really even know that they're there. So what you need to do, you need to wash all surfaces to get rid of roach antigen, keep all food out of roaches' reach, and put out roach traps and catch the strays. And sometimes you really need to do some deep cleaning and really rid the apartment of it. Another pollutant that we've mentioned, but we really need to underscore it, is still the problem of tobacco smoke. Tobacco smoke is, even in California, still a major problem. And we know it not only causes cancer of the lung, it causes cancer of the lip, of the mouth, the throat, the voice box, the esophagus, the stomach, the liver. Liver is cancer over twice as likely, stomach cancer over twice as likely, pancreatic cancer over twice as likely. Bladder and kidney cancer are increased by over fourfold in those that are regularly exposed to tobacco smoke. And of course, passive cigarette smoke can also have its problem. Cancer of the cervix, more likely in smokers. Leukemia, more likely. Colon cancer, slightly more likely. Cancer of the penis in men is more likely as well. And of course, cigarette smoke just doesn't cause cancer. It increases the risk of heart attack, stroke, a number of other diseases, atherosclerosis, etc. It's really the second leading cause of death in this country, and it's a leading cause of death worldwide. And we need to do what we can to help people get over this habit, and to really, it really needs to be buried deep beneath the earth, kind of like we might do some nuclear waste, and just have it out of sight in regards to the problems that it causes. Well, the opposite end of the spectrum is fresh air. And fresh air has its quality as a result of the negatively charged particles. Pollutant air has positive ions, and fresh air has negative ions. And negative ions in fresh air have been shown to improve your sense of well-being. So that means it can improve your mood. It increases the rate and quality of growth in plants and animals. So it's not only good for us, it's good for plants, it's good for animals. It improves the function of your lungs' protective cilia. So you actually have less particulate matter coming in, if there happens to be some, with the fresh air there. It can cause you to be far less anxious, and it can actually help you to be relaxed when it's time to be relaxed. But it also actually helps you to be more alert when it's time to be more alert. It does help lower the body temperature. It lowers the resting heart rate. It decreases the survival of bacteria and viruses in air. What does that mean? That means negative ions are actually a sterilizing force, actually kills pathogens, bacteria and viruses. It improves learning in mammals. We think it also does it in human beings. There are some studies showing that it very likely does it in human beings. But in mammals, the studies were very interesting. Old rats, actually, late adult rats that would be on the tail third of their lifespan, actually learn twice as fast as young rats who are in positive ion air. And so you can take an older person and have them learn twice as fast as a young person by having that old person in a fresh air environment. Now, if you put the young person or the young rat in a fresh air environment, they're going to do a little better. The brain is a little more plastic, so to speak. It's actually geared for learning, etc. And we know there are certain things that you can't learn very well after a certain age. One of those is if you have never learned how to speak or never heard a language. By the time you're 15 years old, you'll never be able to. Now, if you do learn one language before 15, then you can relate that and learn another language, etc., after 15. But we know that the young brain is much more able to pick up other languages, etc. There actually have been infants raised in the wild by wolves, etc., and the humans were not discovered until after the age of 12 or 15, and they were never able to learn a language after that. But fresh air certainly does help with learning. It decreases the severity of stomach ulcers in human beings as well. Now, Dr. Bernell Baldwin and others cite the Middle Eastern Shira Also transliterated Sharav windstorms that bring an abundance of unwanted positive ions with them. During these storms, as many as 30% of individuals develop problems with increased anxiety, suspicion, migraine headaches, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, eye problems, irritability, respiratory congestion, etc. These positive ions seem to alter brain levels of serotonin, an important mood-elevating chemical. These hot desert winds rob the air of helpful negative ions. And actually, people will be able to feel in advance these desert storms coming because these symptoms will develop. The positive ions will actually come before the storm, and all of these symptoms will start going forward. And it may help us to realize why there's so much trouble in the Middle East. They might be able to get along a lot better if they had fresher air over there, and they probably wouldn't be as suspicious of each other either. Good quality, negatively ionized air is found in abundance in natural outdoor environments, especially around evergreen trees where there's moving water, such as a beach surf, or moving water such as waterfalls, or after a thunderstorm. If you happen to live in an area where thunderstorms occur, right after the thunderstorm passes over, get outside and take a deep breath in. It's just invigorating. You're breathing in all of those negative ions, and it actually just makes you want to get up and run a race or something, and to just enjoy that. And if that's one of the reason why Weimar is so popular as well, is because of our evergreen trees here. Just those beautiful tall evergreens, and walking among them, you just have that smell, that fresh air smell that actually helps with learning. Now, this was an interesting study. Researchers found that among more than 300,000 Dutch adults and children, those living near more what type of spaces? Green spaces tend to have lower rates of 15 different health conditions. Now, the interesting thing about this is they didn't necessarily have to always be in those green spaces. They just needed to live near them. And what the authors found is the greater amounts of green space within 1 kilometer, and so that's less than it's 0.6 of a mile is what a kilometer is. So if the green spaces are about a half mile or less, and the greater amount of them, and the closer they are to where you live, it was related to a small reduction in the risk of a number of diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, chronic neck and back pain, asthma, and migraine, just by living near green spaces. Now, the diseases that were most helped by this, I find interesting. The strongest connection was seen with depression and anxiety. And so if you are living in a city, try to choose a place where you've got green spaces close by. You know, if you're in New York City, get that Central Park location or close by. It actually will produce some significant health benefits, and particularly mental health benefits. And of course, the question is, most people assume this is due to the fresh air and the oxygen that are being produced by the plants in these green spaces. But there are also some benefits of just looking at green, some of the studies are showing. And having that green natural foliage look with blue sky, etc. We know the blue sky has benefits as well. And when we're out there in fresh air, it's important to breathe deeply. This study was done and published in the journal Lancet a few years ago. And it shows that when we're in a classroom setting, such as this, and we've been sitting for a while, we have a tendency to breathe more shallow. And as a result, our blood oxygen level can go down a little bit. If you were to have an oximeter on you, it'd probably be less than 95% after you've been sitting, particularly with poor posture. And that can produce problems. It impairs muscle function. It impairs metabolic function. It leads to muscle atrophy, and it leads to exercise intolerance. And that's in addition to some of the heart effects that it's been shown to have. Breathing exercises in this study were shown to not only improve mood, but they also improved exercise tolerance in heart patients, And what they taught them to do was to breathe just 6 times a minute. Now you're saying, boy, you know, the average individual breathes maybe 16 times a minute. If I breathe 6 times a minute, I'm going to be getting less air. Is that true? It is true if we're going to breathe at the same lung capacity. But if you're taught breathing exercises in breathing deeply, you can actually breathe more air in 6 breaths than what the average individual sitting here today is doing in 16. And so, but in order to do that, you have to have that proper posture. You can't do it without the proper posture. And that's one of the reasons why even in children's studies, those in elementary school, etc., it's becoming popular due to studies at Harvard to teach the kids proper posture and proper breathing. So we might just try it here today. You'd want to get your watch out, because if you're breathing 6 times a minute, that's just 1 breath every 10 seconds. So take your watch out and just take a nice deep breath in. Hold it in there for a little bit. And now let it out. All right, 10 seconds again. A little deeper this time. And then let it out. Now, you don't want to get short of breath doing that. If you're getting short of breath doing it, you're not breathing deep enough. And so you might just do that, get your watch out for a minute and do it. You also want to breathe where your diaphragm is actually, as a result of taking the deep breath in, your belly is actually going out instead of in. And when you exhale, the belly goes in. It takes a little bit of exercise in doing that, but the diaphragm should expand and go down as we're taking a deep breath in. And we're actually able to get to the resources, the bottom resources of the lung that way, and our oxygenation can significantly improve, because that's areas of the lung that often don't get much oxygen, and thus those blood vessels constrict down. This was a study in children. And again, this is a new start for the family. But this was an interesting study. For children, healthy lungs mean healthier scores on tests of memory, learning, and intelligence. Researchers at Harvard examined data on 165 Boston children who had been followed since birth. At the age of 6, the children had their lung function tested. At age 9, they completed standard tests of memory, learning, ability, and intelligence. And the researchers found that for each increase in the children's lung function performance, there was a corresponding increase in their cognitive test scores. So lung capacity, very much related to IQ, actually, cognitive ability, academic performance. And again, if you're living in a polluted air environment, it's actually going to adversely affect your lung capacity over time. And so one of the additional benefits of fresh air there. Well, many of these New Start principles are connected. I'm just going to show you a relationship here between the lungs and a couple of other New Start principles. But this was a study in Europe. Children who eat 3 or more burgers a week are at a higher risk of asthma and wheezing. But a healthy diet rich in fruit, vegetables, and omega-3 foods seems to stave off the risk. This was a large international study. Germany, Spain, Britain. They studied 50,000 children across the world, found the link between burgers and asthma was strongest in rich nations where diets with high levels of junk food are more common. And so it's not just the air we breathe, it's what we're eating, and also other aspects, as you'll find, that are also playing a role. What other aspects am I talking about? Actually, sunlight. This was an interesting study. Low levels of vitamin D were correlated with poorer lung function, increased airway reactivity, and more severe asthma. For every 1 point increase in serum levels of 25-hydroxy vitamin D, that's the blood test you would want to get to see where you're at, and normal levels are 50. Anyone under 20 is definitely very deficient. But for every 1 nanogram per milliliter increase in vitamin D levels forced 1 second expiratory volume increase by 21 milliliters. That's quite a bit. And so the sunlight is also important in helping the lung function. And when we combine these things together, good nutrition, good exercise, deep breathing, fresh air, sunlight, we can get a much more additive effect, actually a synergistic effect on health. And that's why when we just center in on one of these to the exclusion of others, it can get a little imbalanced. But when we center on all 8, we can get a lot of good comprehensive health and happiness that can come about as a result. So I encourage you today, keep your house clean. In other words, we want to have that proper ventilation and proper cleaning. At least 2 deep cleanings per year. Some would say even 3 to 4 is better yet. But at least 2 deep cleanings per year. Frequent removal of dust, which can also have its problem. Keep your house well ventilated, especially open up those windows at night when you have that fresher, cooler air. Make sure there's no tobacco smoke or other pollutants hanging around that are having its problem. Allow that cool evening fresh air inside. Put plants in your house, around your house as well. Even if you can get evergreens to grow around your house where you can get those nice negative ions coming in, that would be a benefit. Practice and insist upon correct posture and frequent deep breathing. Try those exercises where you're breathing 6 times a minute. It turns out when you do that, when you're able to do that in an exercise fashion for an hour a day, your oxygen levels improve throughout the entire day. Just those exercises help your lungs for that entire day. And so, get as many negative ions as possible. Some might wonder about, well, maybe we should just buy a negative ion generator. And, you know, they have those things available now. The negative ion generators do produce O3 negative. It's an ozone-type molecule. It can kill bacteria and viruses, can help freshen up the room, but you don't want them too close to you because of the effects of ozone. So normally, if the room is pretty polluted, you want to have that going on and then switch it off for at least 30 seconds or 45 seconds before you walk into that room so that it's not necessarily there. The negative ions from fresh air don't have those adverse qualities. So I'm going to ask you to come with me. Let's get some air. It's time for a new start. Thank you very much.